much of his career researching effective staff training protocols and behavior intervention strategies for individuals with very complex presentation of behavior. After his doctoral degree in behavior analysis from Southern Illinois University, he's worked in a variety of settings across our industry. He is currently the clinical director for Benchmark Human Services, and his primary responsibilities include functioning as the director for the operations in the St. Louis area, but also providing clinical oversight for behavior service department for the Benchmark organization across 12 states. He is also an adjunct faculty for behavior analysis at Washington University, sorry about that, and Central Missouri University. He has the honor of doing more than 100 presentations at a variety of behavioral conferences, and has authored or co-authored over 40 articles in a variety of peer-reviewed journals. Through Dr. Guercio's leadership, many of the individuals that he supported have changed their behavior significantly, and of course he has worked diligently to change the medication dosages for many of the individuals supported. So Dr. Guercio is from the St. Louis area, and we are pleased to have him with us this morning. So with that, John, you can take it away. Thank you again so much for being here. We always appreciate your steadfast support for the department, and specifically for the multi-tiered system of support within the state of Missouri.
So glad to be of assistance, and it's a wonderful team that you guys have. Love working with you and now Sin and Lucas and Melantha, and so it's been fantastic. And I love following my brother here, Dr. Pauly. I highly recommend their book. I teach an OBM course, and I am going to be including that book in my OBM course. It's fantastic. I had highlighter all over the book when I was reading it, the 5 laws. So it's just a definite keeper. So I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to get into a little bit. And so I just want to make sure with some thumbs up, everybody can see my screen, and we're all cool and good to go. There we go, Rita. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk today about nurturance, nurturing activities, and I think that this is one of the things that I've included in my recent book, where it have a curriculum for adults with extreme behavior. And so the curriculum in the book, the foundation which most of it is built on, is actually staffing, and how we get our staff to be able to work with a particularly difficult population. And I think that starts with us examining where they are in terms of their development. So we're going to talk about Dr. Anthony Bigman's fantastic book, The Nurture Effect, and we're going to discuss a number of things related to that. So as we lay out the objectives for the day, I'm going to talk a little bit about trauma, and I know that's the buzzword, and that's kind of what's out there, and we have really incorporated trauma awareness into kind of the fabric of the organization Benchmark, and one of the things that we do is we really try to be as steadfast as we can at having staff identify their level of trauma that they've experienced. Okay, I'm going to talk about the history of that and what that looks like. But we're going to look at how that relates to individuals that provide services to individuals in group homes or other settings. We're also going to look at staff and being able to look at proactive ways that staff can work with clients with extreme aggression. Okay, we're going to talk about nurturing as it comes to that. We're going to talk about positive interaction styles. And we're going to look at strategies also that promote wellness and care of individuals with significant aggressive behavior and the staff that care for them. And I think that's a really, really big one, because we focus so much on trying to look at how do we take care of the folks that we serve. We don't take care of ourselves. And that's a big theme that I've been working on for a number of years now. And then looking at how can we promote a nurturing teaching interaction style. And again, that's the key part, teaching interaction style that facilitates increased autonomy of the people that we serve. And a lot of this, as we're talking about it, it's based on active teaching. And I think that, a lot of us, as Paulie referred, a lot of us OGs, I didn't think I would ever use that in a sentence, but I guess I have now. But as we go through, one of the things that we focused on is active teaching, and that's a big part. And I think I just saw a question pop up. The title of the book is The Assessment of Adult Core Competencies, and it's through Hedgehog Publishing is where my book is located. But all these things are included within the staff training chapter, some of the initial chapters of the book. So as I mentioned, a lot of this is based on the nurture effect. Some of the slides I'm using today, I actually use with our staff. We actually have an overall staffing perspective that we do with a lot of our new staff, where we actually call it TCS, or therapeutic communication skills, and we train all of our staff on how to be nurturing. And, to be totally honest, that's tough. A lot of times we're in a bigger city and we have a lot of individuals that show up to provide these services that maybe don't have the experience of a nurturing background. They weren't nurtured themselves. All right. And then as a result, we're starting out on the wrong foot. So one of the things that I want to do is to be able to kind of go through this, talk a little bit more about what that means. But first, I want to talk about this excellent piece of scholarship here that you see, the rabbit effect, that I've been talking a lot about lately. It's by Dr. Kelly Harding. And as part of this whole idea of nurturance and nurturing, one of the big things is we have to look at what's happiness. How do we define happiness? And a lot of times as behavior analysts or therapists, scientists, we look at this whole concept of kindness with kind of a dubious look. So how do you define kindness from the perspective of behavior analysis? This book describes it from a scientific perspective. Okay, so the rabbit effect. Why the title? I'll get into that. Okay, so one of the things that they discuss in the book is they talk about there was a scientific experiment that was done years ago where they had these white rabbits that they were exposing to the typical Western diet. Okay, so loads of high fat, fried, fatty food, cholesterol doused food for the rabbits. Okay, and so what they found is naturally what you would expect. They found that with the majority of the rabbits, they found increases in coronary artery disease, arterial plaques, different things where the rabbits were actually showing signs of coronary artery disease and potential issues down the road related to that. An interesting thing that they found, though, is that they found a certain percentage of these rabbits had 60% less plaque accumulation than the others. Okay, so that kind of blew the mind of the researchers. They couldn't figure out why. Okay, so one of the things that they looked at was they narrowed it down and found out that all of the rabbits that showed the reduced accumulations of cholesterol, fat in their arteries, all those rabbits, every single one, were handled by the same researcher. And what she did after the fact is that she reported, which we know now will probably be a confound, but this led to this whole book and this wonderful body of literature that's out there now, that all those rabbits that showed the 60% reduction in plaque accumulation, the research assistant reported that she had held them, cuddled them, talked to them, nurtured them as a result of doing this, and they saw physiological changes as a result. Okay, so we're looking at this now. We have science behind it, that as we look at it and say, oh, it's good to be nice to people, we have science behind it. And this book is filled with page after page of information just like this. So the rabbits, the heart rate, blood pressure, all these things were up, but the rabbits that had this nurturing attention were less impacted from a physiological perspective, which I thought was pretty cool to look at. So a huge difference. The fat deposits, as I mentioned, one group had 60% fewer deposits, and it's the same researcher had handled all of them. So, if you look at cuddling, petting, and now I'm not saying go out and cuddle and pet your clients, all right? But what I'm saying is that, hey, that fist bump, the pat on the back, the ability to kind of go in and to kind of show that type of attention. Before I came in, we have Thursday is our group days here at Benchmark. So we've got one of our groups starting now, and I went in and I was, shaking hands and fist bumping a lot of the clients who are there. And they come up, hey, I miss you. They want to give me a hug. And those are the types of things I think that, you may not find in Java, you may not find in some of our journals, but I think it needs to be in there. And I'm going to talk to you about some research that we have done and are continuing to do that relates to this and kind of where this comes in. So within this book, the rabbit effect, they talk about the whole psychosocial model, which I'm sure most of us are familiar with. We just talked about the bio part of it, right? The physiology of kindness, and then also looking at what we would call the psychiatric or the psycho part of the biopsychosocial model, dealing with from a psychiatric perspective or just from a psychological perspective where a person is, and in their social environment. So Dr. George Engel, this is back in '77, produced an article in a very prestigious journal in Science, and he questioned that biology alone is not enough to explain illness. Okay, so tell that to a lot of MDs, and they're going to look at you like you got three heads. But the fact is that this is true. Many issues that we suffer from, physical issues, can't just be explained through biology. And there's this biomedical model that we then fall back on. And it's not enough to explain this. And I think that, we see a lot of cancer survivors and others that go through and they have certain interventions that produce positive outcomes that may be a bit of a departure from this biomedical model. So then this biopsychosocial model was introduced, and it included layers of health. Okay, nothing exists in isolation. And this is a little bit of a diagram that's included of Dr. Engel's work. And if you look at things, the medical model just looks at what you see in the center there, okay, the molecular level. Okay, somebody has a cancerous tumor, it's located in this lymph node, and this is what we're going to look at. So then at the molecular level, then the approach would be we're going to try chemo, radiation, whatever that might be, to address the issue. But he actually has said, hey, let's look outside of this, okay, further. And as you see each of the boxes, as it expands more, you go from the cellular level to the tissue level, all the way up to the biosphere, okay? You go through issues of culture, family, one and two-person interactions, okay, things that you might be perseverating on and how that might be an issue. So this is a great continuum of the what he called the natural systems that contribute to wellness, all right? And there's a lot that goes along with this. So what was also found is about 80 to 90% of people's health depends on factors outside of the clinical realm, okay, the doctor's office, the therapist's office. And these are social, political, environmental, and a lot of these issues we look at, they're called hidden factors. Okay, because if you look at it, I can't do it anymore, so I don't do news. I can't watch it. It just gets me too ticked off. So I do ESPN and a steady dose of sports, and you'll see fewer and fewer of these issues that pop up. But those things still show up there. You've got individuals now where I think the other day the Kansas City Royals were going into Canada to play the Blue Jays, and in Canada, you can't get into the country unless you're vaccinated. So Kansas City had 10 players that weren't vaccinated. They couldn't get into the country. And so I'm watching sports and I still get it. I still get the political stuff. And, once I, finish saying, gosh, those dumbasses, what are they thinking? Sorry for that editorial there. But you have to look at these things that just pepper us every single day to look at, these one-on-one, our social ties, work, education. Okay, in your workplace, if you've got a toxic work environment, you're not involved in a nurturing situation. If we're not providing nurturing cultures and environments for our direct care staff, then what are they providing to the people that we serve? So I think these are questions we need to keep looking at. And one of the things that we talk to staff about all the time, and we even talk to our clients about this in the group, is that as we go through the issue, pain is inevitable and suffering is optional. And I go over this a lot, and I think for clients this resonates, but I really want this to resonate for staff as well, because pain's going to happen. We're going to lose people, guys. We're going to have deadlines that overwhelm us. We're going to have travel plans. We're going to lose that flight. Our flights are going to be delayed. That's inevitable, but the suffering part is optional. And if you continue to focus on it and continue to make that a part of everything you're about, then you're making things worse, and you can't be present to what you need to be doing with those that we work with. So there's this story they talk about in the book of the two arrows. And I've shifted a little bit here, and I'm going to give a plug for another fantastic book here on the next slide. But it talks about the story of the two arrows, where if you looked at most people when they're faced with pain, that's natural. But then a lot of individuals go on to get into this whole cycle of sorrow, grieving, lamenting, which then worsens the pain. And this is called in Buddhism, Buddha actually looks at this as the two pains, or the two arrows. So the story goes, as you see in the diagram there, if you get shot by an arrow, it causes pain. If you sorrow, grieve, or lament, that's the second pain. And the wise person stops at the first pain. Okay, it kind of makes a lot of sense, right? So I think that if we're looking at that, if we shift to a more compassionate tone about everything that happens to us, or those that we work with, or those that we supervise, we can avoid the worry and suffering that is the second arrow. So it's a great excerpt I found from this particular reference here, the Book of Joy. It's from the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, and just incredible book. And we lost Bishop Tutu recently. I think he passed away within the last year. But it just talks about how these two magnificent forces of good and kindness in the world actually go through. And, most of us know the Dalai Lama and Bishop Tutu in South Africa, a lot of the things that they have worked on together to promote kindness, to promote care and love of our fellow man. That you look at these anguish and sadness things that are going to happen to us every day that we are alive, and they just happen. Okay, you can't really control this, and they give this likeness that it's like a flower that we open and blossom because of other people. But if we go through and we are a recluse, or we spend time and we're not around other people, then you don't have this opportunity to blossom. Okay, so iron sharpens iron. Okay, that's one of those things that we have to look at. So they go on to talk about a little bit about suffering, and how that suffering, you got life, you got suffering, all right? And it's a necessary ingredient for life. That's a non-negotiable. And as a result, though, I think one of the things that a lot of people don't realize, I had people, every day ask me, it's like, gosh, how do you, my wife a lot, you get all these phone calls, and it's after hours, and, all these horrible issues that are happening, and you have to go through and problem solve. How do you deal with that? Well, that helps me to develop compassion for those that are going through those issues. I can get ticked about it. I can kind of go into denial about it, but that would be self-centered, okay, if I'm focusing here. So we have to focus and look at having this compassion kind of directed outward. So too much self-centered thinking is the source of suffering. And my clients don't like it when I say that, because then, you're saying I'm self-centered. I'm saying too much self-centered focus is the source of suffering, okay? So we need to take it for what that is. But if you have this compassionate concern for others and their well-being, that's kind of the source of happiness. And I think that's the biggest thing that we get. The best DSPs that we see, the best BCBAs that we see, the best MSWs that we see, the best managers that we see are those that have a compassionate concern for others, all right? It drives what we do. So the encouragement is, let's shift the focus, all right? Let's get a little bit of a focus and shift a little bit to focusing to another person, okay? And as you do that, you know what happens, okay? Your own pain kind of diminishes as a result. And that's a tough one. And, I talk to our staff a lot, and to give, our clients an idea, I say, okay, I want you to imagine as you're driving with your staff today, Okay, a lot of street corners in St. Louis, there are individuals that hold up the sign, "I'm homeless," and those types of things. And I just asked the staff and others, that are in the room at the time, what are your first thoughts? Oh, look at that bum. I wish he'd quit, holding his hand out. He doesn't. Shift your focus to what put them there. What's the pain? What's the issue? And that helps you to shift a lot easier to what's going on with those that we serve. So this role we all find ourselves in right now. I mean, if you're on this call, you're in this role, that taking care of others and helping others, that's the best way to discover your own joy. Okay, and to have a happy life. And just happiness and joy. Happiness is, oh, I just got my lottery ticket. Hey, I won 20 bucks. That's happiness. Joy is, I'm waking up every day. I'm ready to roll. I really love what I do. And, oh, damn, I got a flat tire. Okay, well, you know what? I'll just take the car in, get it fixed. I'll be an hour or two late. Okay, that's joy. As opposed to, oh, gosh, why do things like this always happen to me? Okay, so that's the focus, and that's what I try to exude, and that's what I really want our staff to be able to pick up on and see. And here's a big one, lessen your own self-absorption. Okay, we're a me society, and you look at me, help me, do this for me. But if you do that, and here's 3 tips, okay, that'll help you with this. And I find these very useful, and I try to focus on those. And a lot of the stuff I try to look at and read is to generate this approach. Okay, like how to stop complaining and how to take things more in a positive light, but reframe your situation. Okay, as you look at where you are with this, to be able to reframe this. Okay, and I've used this example a lot, but when our daughter was very young, she had a lot of intracranial swelling and had to have a shunt placed. And we were at Children's Hospital, and I remembered, my wife and I were talking, oh, this is horrible. We were upset, and then we looked across the room that we were sharing the room with, and this little 6-year-old was in the next bed suffering from cancer. Okay, so reframe your position. This could be worse. And choosing to be kind and generous, that's a choice. Okay, you can either be reclusive and not have that focus, or go through and say, you know what, I'm going to be generous. I'm going to experience gratitude as a result of it. Because I think a really big statement that I'd love to share with staff is that gratitude drives attitude. If you look at it, gratitude drives attitude. If you're thankful for the things you've got, then your attitude is going to be one that's positive. You're not going to be focused on all the negative. This is a pretty cool one here that I like to talk a lot about, is that, most people, okay, whenever you do a preference assessment with a client, or you do a preference assessment with a staff, we've done several looking at data collection interventions with our staff and trying to figure out with them, okay, what are the things you want to work on? What could you work for to increase, your data collection behavior? We're looking at reinforcers, and a lot of them want either, things that tickets to go out to eat, or other things related to video gaming, or iTunes cards, things of that nature. But happiness through sensory gratifications, and this is from the Tutu in the Dalai Lama book. It's like drinking salt water to quench your thirst. If you look at that from that perspective, that okay, in the moment, it's wet and it's you're thirsty, but the salt eventually is going to dehydrate you, and you're going to be in a worse situation than you were when you started. Okay, so this pursuit, and so what happens when you drink seawater? Okay, and this is a great one that I love to walk our staff through, and say if these are the things that you're trying to look at, and same thing with our clients. I want this, and I want these goodies. I want my cigarettes. Oh, and by the way, I'd love some alone time because I want to be able to go to my boyfriend and girlfriend's house. That's fine, but that can't be the primary focus. And I think a lot of times it is. So there's a lot of really cool stuff that I'm going to get into, and I'm looking at my time, and I'm well behind time. As this could probably be a 2 or 3 hour talk, but one of the issues that we, and by we I mean behavior analysis and the field in general, have looked at is these promise neighborhoods that try to incorporate all of the values I just talked about, where they actually look at learning programs, services in schools, and they go and they look at areas where individuals are living in poverty, okay, or low socioeconomic status, and children and youth, okay, and I even put young adults from low income families in these concentrated poverty areas, and they look at how do we use the science of behavior analysis to work in these neighborhoods to actually produce a change for these individuals. And if you look up promised neighborhoods and you Google it, there's a lot of really neat information in there. In the promised neighborhood, it's a strategy to look at these distressed communities and assess what's going on at the academic level, what's going on at the family level, what's going on at the residential and the policymaking level, to get to the point where hopefully we can do away with a lot of these issues. So a lot of the things they talk about, cradle to career supports. I'm going to pick the pace up a little bit because I want to make sure we get through everything today. But having early childhood programs, and then looking at things that are kind of in my wheelhouse that I work with every day. High school programs, college and career options after that, and then looking at what happens from that career perspective at that stage. And that's a lot in my curriculum. We talk about what are pre-voc skills, what are vocational skills, what produces that thrust or training to allow the person to be successful in those areas. An example here, this is from my own hometown, Washington County, Mississippi. And Deer Creek, which is in Leland, which is where my grandparents grew up and my dad was raised. They have a promised neighborhood here, but look at some of these numbers. Is that this particular area is 66% African American, 31% Caucasian, and 2% Latino. Okay, and there is a 32% reduction for these residents, or 32% of these residents that live at or below the federal poverty level. Okay, which is we see that a lot in Mississippi. Just growing up there, it was just something I was used to. But kindergarten development, academic challenges, 43% of kindergartners are ready for school. And it's half, essentially. 16% are proficient in math skills. So I think you have to look at, what are some universal strategies, a lot of things that Paulie talked about a little bit earlier to move forward. So there's this science of nurturing, I think, is very, very important. And so, their goals have been, since they've done this work, to get 80%, 87% of these kids graduating on time and trying to make a difference. And so a lot of these goals, if you look at it, 29,000, I think, is the average median income in Washington County, okay, where I grew up. And you have about 2,500 kids live in the neighborhood of that area within Washington County. So the area is now looking at how do we then put these promise neighborhoods. They've done summer camps and the College Promise Initiative, which is on the right-hand side there, where they're looking at speakers and events on life after high school. Okay, what's out there? What are the things that could be alternatives to either gang life or things where you might be involved in substances and things won't go anywhere. So you have to look at those areas and see how that's developed. And so I think it's on a multi-level perspective. And I know Paulie talked about that as well. But I think that, I talked about happiness and joy earlier, and happiness is short-lived. And I think that as we look at that, this enjoyment of pleasure, through our senses is what we're all driven by. And I think it is very difficult to be able to not see that or not experience that on a regular basis. The next level is to get to that joy, to get to what is joy for you in your work? What is joy for you in, what you do in your free time? For me, I had an industry meeting the last 3 days. I've been out of town, was at the Lake of the Ozarks, but a lot of the time, my wife was, we split the driving, and I'm writing. That's a huge reinforcer for me, is writing. So I think looking at in writing about behavior analysis. So how do you look at this love, compassion, and generosity, these constructs? And if you look at that, they're all based in joy. And they're things that we all shoot for. But joy is a lot longer lasting than just happiness, which is typically, it's like, oh, I just had that fantastic pizza. Or, I just had, a couple of glasses of Jameson and Coke. And that's sensory happiness. Okay, it's not joy. And so I think you have to look at the joy at the level of your heart, not just your senses. And those are things that we teach. Okay, I'm not going to be able to go a lot into, the program that we have here, the therapeutic communication skills, but we touch on it a lot and talk about staff wellness and how a lot of these things actually work. But you have to look at, and this kind of goes back a little bit to the rabbit effect and talking about from a physiological perspective that the influence from our brain. Okay, we know this from MRIs and brain scans. So we have this ability to maintain positive states. We've got an ability to recover from negative states. All right. And with my folks I work with, I call, let's turn that around. Okay, if we're struggling, we're having a rough day, we can easily turn that around. That doesn't mean the rest of the day or the week has to be shot as well. There's also this ability to focus and avoid wandering, okay, of the mind, or focusing on these negative thoughts. And this is a huge field within behavior analysis that is acceptance and commitment therapy and mindfulness training. So we focus a lot on this, and I encourage our staff to do this as well. Get a regular mindfulness practice to be able to help you do your job better. And then looking at our ability to be generous. I think that's a really, really big one. So as we go through this, there's a number of things in our environment, and I've talked about promised neighborhoods, and I've talked about how the promised neighborhood actually helps individuals to maybe get into environments that are poorly constructed, or the schools or the work opportunities. So there's a lot of distal influences, such as poverty and lack of access to health care, and a lot of these issues that down the road can lead to the disadvantage and a lot of the trauma that a lot of our staff experience. Okay, so I'm going to go over these. I'm going to give us our, because I see that we're about at our midway point. So I'm going to give, it's okay with Rita, I'm going to give out our code word. And I believe our code word is pyramid.
That is correct, John. Pyramid. Thank you.
All right.
Go ahead and type that in the chat box, and we'll allow John to move on while you're doing that.
Okay. So as we talk about this, and if you've seen a presentation I've done in the last 2 or 3 years, you've probably seen this slide. I've got some newer ones that I'm always adding to my information about this. But really, as you look at this, we look at adverse childhood experiences. And this is from a study done by Vincent Felitti and Bob Anda with the CDC. And they looked at, in childhood, if individuals experience any of the 10 things that you see on your screen. And this is something that I tend to perseverate on, because I see this, and I know that there are a few people that are on here now, Todd Streff being one of them, that we have worked together in the past. And we used to always commiserate and talk, and I'm sure you guys, everybody else on this call does the same thing. Why are staff making the decisions that they are? Why are they undoing the plan I just put in place? Why, when I have this positive interaction style that I really, really encourage, why do I then hear that individuals are raising their voice towards clients or otherwise? And this is why. Okay, they have experienced any number of these things, or majority of these things: physical abuse, emotional abuse, or sexual abuse. Okay, neglect, physical neglect, or emotional neglect. Household dysfunction. Okay, that's another really, really big one that is in there. Mental illness is part of that. If you grew up with a family member, and what we do is with all of our staff, as they start out the first day after they do their mandatory trainings, they come into this training. It's 2 days. And we have them evaluate which of these things happened to them. Okay, I keep the data, but I don't have them write their name, because I really want the anonymity that goes with that. Have you lived with someone? Did you grow up with someone that was in jail, that was incarcerated? Did you grow up observing your mom being mistreated or abused? Did you grow up in a home where substance abuse was prevalent? Did you grow up in a home where your parents were divorced and you live with mom or dad or grandparents? Okay, very important questions. And what the science is showing us, okay, and it becomes more and more evident every year, the more studies that come out, is that as you get to that 3 and 4 number, you got 3 or 4 of these things that have happened to you, the neglect, the physical abuse. As soon as you get to north of 3, you got problems. okay, and pretty serious problems. And all the things that, for years, as I'm kind of working on the second edition of my book now, and one of the things that I'm really kind of on a tangent about is I get really fed up when I hear he knows what he's doing, she knows what she's doing. Okay, I hope so. I mean, however you want to define that, I hope so. That means that she or he, they're discerning the contingencies. So that's what that means. But I think that as we look at this, staff that are more likely to say that, they're more likely to get frustrated with that. I think in the past, we've been more likely to say, oh, that's due to their cultural background, that's a race issue, or that's a gender issue. And we have not been informed that no, it's an ACE issue. It's an issue of what you experienced growing up. In this original study that showed this, a lot of people would say, "Oh, well, this study was done in a poor Hispanic or a poor African American neighborhood." No, 70% of this study was done in San Diego with Caucasians. Okay, so it's not a race issue. Okay, it's an ACEs issue. It's an early learning issue. Okay, so abuse is not bound to culture or gender. Abuse is across the board, and depending on how much of it you've experienced, these long-term effects are what we usually see pop up. Is that you see a lack of physical activity. People start to smoke, and I think as I'm looking, I'm popping up, and I'm seeing some of the comments. Whenever I do a staff training on this, I showed the Nadine Burke Harris TED Talk on this, the one where she's wearing the red dress, and it's about a 20-minute fantastic overview of ACEs. Okay, and how they can impact people down the road. And one of the things that she says is that a lot of people say, well, that makes sense. You're stressed out and you have a lot of abuse growing up. You're going to drink, you're going to smoke. Well, that's not it. The science of it shows that it alters your DNA. And the way she describes it is the way the DNA is written and transcribed. She's got a great book called The Deepest Well, WELL, and it really talks about these types of things that as you go through, a lot of people say, wow, now you taught us all this about these ACEs. It's a sad, sad story. It's pretty negative. Then for the rest of my life, I'm stuck with all these physical problems and mental issues and health problems. Jail. Okay, that's one of the things I didn't show, but those with north of 5 ACEs are much more likely to be placed in jail or attempt suicide. I think the numbers are 12 times increased likelihood of a suicide attempt. But Dr. Harris talks about these 6 things, and she talks about sleep, okay, and being able to get your 7 hours a night. Okay, that's non-negotiable. That's another thing, non-negotiable. It's you got to get to bed at 8. Get to bed at 8. Okay, if you have to be up at 4 or 5, whatever, get to bed at 8. Okay, a lot of people, you can't make up sleep. Oh, I'm just going to catch up on the weekend. No, you're not. Your body's not catching up. Okay, sleep, big one. Exercise, some form, even if it's walking or taking the lunch break and having a bite to eat. And our office building here is a number of interconnected parking lots. Taking that stroll, getting your steps in, to do that. Nutrition. Okay, that's a really big one. I think as you look at the nutrition that most individuals do, I like to say that, I watch and I go into a lot of our homes, and we've got one of our RBTs now that's fantastic. She's, getting our folks getting body scans. They're looking at the percentage body fat and looking at healthy eating. And, we've gotten crock pots, and I'm trying to be kind of a healthy influence and try to get folks to, let's use the Instapot, and here's some things we can make that are in there that are plant-based, and you don't have to eat the red meat all the time. So diet, nutrition is a really big one. Mindfulness, that's another big one, having some type of mindfulness practice to where you're focusing on what's going on around you and the things that you're experiencing. Okay, and you're getting outside of your mind. Okay, get into your body a little bit, because typically we stay involved and we're in here and we're focused on all the things that we got to do here that we don't live in the moment. And that's the biggest part. That's the huge issue. And then healthy relationships and mental health, those two go together. Just like having somebody that is taking care of your mental health. And I tell clients and staff alike, take your meds. Okay, take your meds. If your doctor has you on something, it's for a reason. Okay, if it's taking your vitamins or if you're taking your medication, or that's going to help you with your relationships with others. So these 6 self-care skills can do a lot to kind of ameliorate or totally do away with a lot of the effects of increased ACEs. And so that's what we do. We have a portion of our therapeutic communication skills classes where we encourage and we teach these skills for staff on how to do this. Okay, I share these data quite a bit. I update them a lot of the time as well. And I think that as we're looking at a lot of these things, one of the issues that we do let staff know over and over again is that as you're going through these particular times, it's not selfish to be able to take care of yourself. You can't take care of others if you don't take care of yourself. Okay, I use the example if you're on the airplane. Okay, what do they tell you? Well, we don't know because most people don't listen to flight attendants when they're telling us what to do. But what they're telling you to do is, if the oxygen mask drop down, put yours on first before you put one on your child. Okay, you got to take care of yourself first before you take care of others. And so this is a tool that I use called the Holmes and Ray stressful life events scale. And it goes through a number of different examples of things that are just potential happenings in your life: divorce, changing your church, moving, new job. And you look at a lot of, if you have a score over 200, then that's indicative that you're going to have a health related or stress related medical issue. Okay, remember at the very beginning, the rabbit effect, that you're going to have some type of an issue that's going to happen to you. Look at the number. This is from a recent survey of our staff. We've got people that are 450 plus. Okay, so there are people that are in need out there that I think that we need to go through and get this whole idea of, if you take care of yourself, then you're going to be able to take care of others. This one I want to there are a couple of slides, and I really want to be mindful of our time, so I don't want to, can't take you guys past, but if we go through the lifelong effects of these adverse childhood experiences, we get disrupted neurodevelopment. Okay, as you can see in the pyramid there, that as we age, if we have this repeated release of cortisol and all the other stress hormones that occurs in your body over and over again through being in a stressful situation, then our neurodevelopment, okay, our tolerance, okay, I'm talking about staff. So we can't tolerate issues with people that are asking us questions all day long or getting upset with us or not listening to us. Then there's social, emotional, and cognitive impairment. Okay, gosh, not a good thing for a DSP. Then these health risk behaviors that we talked about, and then early death. So there's a lot of these negative things that can happen, that things like the Promise Neighborhoods and these other initiatives get into, looking at trying to intervene on an overall level. And basically what we're trying to do here is to have kind of a promise organization, for lack of a better term, that I think that you put these things in place. And I think that, as Rita mentioned at the outset, and I had the opportunity to listen to Lucas talk at our meeting a couple of days ago. And in the tiered support model, I think this is, as we're looking at this, the supports that we're looking at, we have to almost have a promise organization model, okay, or promise supports, something where we look at putting these things in place and not relying so much on what you see there. I can't imagine a talk I think I've had in a long time where I've not included Murray Sidman's book that talks about coercion and how our lives operate out of coercion. Okay, our husbands and wives coerce us. All right, our sons and daughters coerce us. Our coworkers coerce us. Our jobs coerce us at times. I don't think it's intentional, but most individuals, Paulie talked about a deadline, okay, deadline being a stimulus for action, but a lot of people look at that as coercive. Oh gosh, I have to do this now. And most people procrastinate, but we want a life that's kind of not so much devoid of coercion, but, as little as possible. So information is key in providing that. And I keep a slide deck that's up to about 300 or 400 slides now, that whenever I see something that I think is really neat and that applies to as Pat Fryman would say, to this way of thinking, then I think that you look at it, and I kind of share it and say, okay, this is one I thought would be very applicable today, that, dads make a big difference. Okay. And I'm not just saying that because I am a dad, but I'm saying this to all the dads that maybe aren't dads, across the board. And so I think if you look at it, kids that grow up with involved fathers, okay, and it doesn't say, okay, you got to stay married, but involved fathers, they're 39% more likely to earn mostly A's in school. Okay, look at that other number, 75% less likely to have a teen birth, okay, and 80% less likely to spend time in jail. Okay, go dads. Not at all trying to say anything negative about moms, because most of the time you guys are doing what you need to do. A lot of times us dads need to step it up. So I talk to a lot of our staff because I want that to hit somebody's ears, and at some point say, oh, okay, I need to be able to, maybe I can have an impact to be able to look at this and to avoid things like this antisocial behavior. Main point I want to make here is that a lot of things that we see that we typically term antisocial behavior, these things 10 years ago were costing us $600 billion a year to be able to have to address. And I think that you look at it in the family. I talked about poor nutrition and other things earlier, but I think that if you look at how this stuff impacts us, $600 billion, we could find a lot of other uses for in our national budget and state budgets. And I think if we just put some of this nurturance in effect, there's a great book by Jonathan Kozol. I know I'm throwing out a lot of these, resources here, but I kind of read for a hobby. So I got just stacks of these. That he wrote a book called Death at an Early Age. It won the Book of the Year prize, and I want to maybe say it the Pulitzer too. But he talks about poor environments that kids grow up in, teaches a kid, young adult, that they have to battle for their own existence. So many times, just to show that I'm here, I had a client tell me the other day, I cut myself just to make sure I'm alive. Okay, and a lot of times you see or hear that because I think somebody threw out something earlier about The Body Keeps the Score. Another fantastic book. You guys are going to fill up your Amazon in baskets today. But as you look at it, the Body Knows the Score talks a lot about how trauma numbs you to your future experiences. And your future experiences, if cutting yourself is the way to get you to where you're, aware of these things, then it helps to look at how we can change the playing field. So Jonathan Kozol talks a lot about how these kids in early intervention or kids in school systems he worked in. He was a Harvard-trained teacher that of his own volition decided to go into the poorest schools in the Boston area, and he found discrepancies, and I'm just throwing these numbers out. They're not the actual ones from the book, but the discrepancies are. So he said that, for instance, a kid in inner city Boston might have $100 a week that's allotted to him for lunches and books and everything else. But in a more prestigious part of Boston, that number might be $500, $600, or $700 a week that are allotted to that kid. So it's decisions we're making, I think, in terms of at the legislative level and others. So there's just a lot of stuff there that I'm not going to go through each of the things that you went over because I want to have time for the remaining slides that I have to get through. But I think that as we get through, when we look at these numbers, and a lot of these numbers, when I'm talking about babies and teenage girls and children, a lot of these were those of us that serve adults, or this is our population 20 years ago, 15 years ago. So 35% of babies born to teenage moms are arrested by the age of 15. 80 out of 1,000 teenage girls are getting pregnant each year. Okay, those are pretty staggering numbers. And to combat this, New York City actually put a nurse family partnership program in place. And they had individuals go through and they would teach these young moms how to care for your children. Okay, the baby's crying, you don't shake the baby. When the baby's crying, you don't hit the baby. And I'm sure we're all shocked to hear that, but there's a lot of abuse that happens when children don't know how to parent. And so this nurse family partnership, they would have individuals come in and they would actually talk to the parents that were there. And what they found is they had a lot of dropout. Okay, a lot of these moms did not attend the full session. So what they did is, as a result of that, they said, okay, you attend the full 2 weeks of these parenting sessions, and how to appropriately set boundaries, appropriate discipline, and discipline without a lot of punishment. Then you get a month's worth of free groceries for participating. And they found that they almost had 100% participation as a result of that. And so, the Obama administration put billions of dollars into these programs. Okay. And I'm sure the Biden administration is doing the same thing. And so I think as we look at a lot of these things, that the data speak for themselves. Moms that participated in these programs, and this is that last bullet there, moms that were in these programs, their kids were arrested half as much as those that did not go through the program. Okay, if I'm a senator or I'm a House of Representatives member, that's all I need to see, those data. Okay, to let's do that, as opposed to maybe spending that money on another nuclear warhead or other things that we could do. The school lunches, nurturing programs like this. I think that this is the value, a lot more bang for the buck than we would get for everything else. So I'm going to slide past some of these because I think that it's I really, like I said, interest of time. But as we're going through it, for our staff, as I go through therapeutic communication skills, this is how I summarize the last 45 minutes. I give them this visual and say, top left there, mom loses her job. And as a result, you've got less food or no food in the fridge. Dad gets upset. Then he takes it out on mom. And then you've got there's 2 or 3 aces that we can count right there. The daughter's upset, then there's poor grades, and then there's teenage pregnancy. And so not all of the first step there leads to the last step, but it's just to kind of show the progression that these things don't just happen automatically or out of the blue. We now know that there's causation related to this, and it's everything that we've talked about it. So our goal is to create nurturing interactions. And, how do you teach somebody without really, imploring? Okay, these are the questions. So teach without imploring or demanding. Okay, we can still teach without being aversive. Active teaching, I talked a lot about, and how these things are so important. And then the way that we train staff and the way that these things are incorporated means a lot. A lot of the studies that we've done have shown that staff in services don't work. You have to show staff how to do it and then have them demonstrate for you through behavioral skills training and competency-based post-testing that they get it and they understand how to do that. So I'm going to wind up here pretty quickly and go through my last few slides here. And this is the absolute core of our positive interaction style training. And I know many of you have heard this, and this is but this is part of what we do, and this is what works. And I've shared this. I work with a couple of individuals and organizations. I do some consulting in various parts of the area, the other parts of the U.S. and the world, dealing with positive interactions and sharing what Pearl is, because I have a lot of people that ask questions. So Pearls, positive. Okay, so being upbeat, enthusiastic about what you're doing. Okay, early, addressing issues as soon as they occur. Okay, all is interacting with all the clients. Okay, when I finish this and I go back into that room where the groups are, once the group's over, everybody's going to want to come up and talk to me. And I can't say, I'm only going to talk to you and not you. Then the one in the back of the room not getting the attention is going to get the attention when the chair goes flying through the air. So all clients, as much as you can, reinforcing appropriate behavior. Okay, and I'm just glancing over these. There's so much more to this, but I want to show you the research article and a lot of the stuff that we've done, as a result. Looking for teachable moments. This is the active teaching component, and then speaking softly. Okay, and so we've done numerous studies on this and book chapters, and published articles in the literature that shares the efficacy of this approach. So this is an article where we actually looked at, we've been able to for years increase the Pearl scores of staff that were pretty low historically. But wanted to look at what happens when we increase positive interactions with respect to other behavior, okay? Productive involvement, active engagement, these types of things. So we basically had a baseline session where we provided interactions with no feedback. We observed staff interact with clients, gave them no feedback. Then we gave them a series of videos where the first video, they were self-evaluating samples that they rated themselves. So this was a video of an exemplar of a person with a great interaction style, and they watched this. And then the second video, they actually watched video of themselves and kind of rated what they saw as Pearl scores and were given feedback. Okay, so more like a behavioral skills training model. So a lot of detail as far as what we did, but time precludes our ability to explain that. So data speaks louder than words. So what we found is this is the Pearl scores, okay, for each of our staff. And we found very low, I'm talking 0 to 10% Pearl scores in most of the homes. So not a lot of active teaching was going on. There was a lot of coercion. There was a lot of things that were going on that then once we showed the video of the exemplar, then we saw we had a huge increase. But then when we had staff rate themselves, they were able to get close to 100% in terms of their display of Pearl scores. So we also then looked at, okay, so we increased the Pearl scores. What else does that do as a result of things like productive involvement? Okay, so as you can see here, this particular graph shows the Pearl behavior of each individual as we would go through, and they increase and they observed other staff doing this. They got feedback on their own interaction style. The productive activity of the clients, okay, were clients engaged in productive age-appropriate activities. And as we can see, most of the homes that we did this in, they were not. And then once we went through and we actually had them, we did in-service, which you can see there. We got a minimal spike and then back down again, which is what you're going to see with most things that you train in in-services. And then as they were able to observe that behavior in someone else and in themselves and were given feedback, that increased. We used Dennis Reed's happiness indices, and we actually went through and looked at the happiness indices for the clients when Pearl behavior was at its height. And across the board, these things increased. So there's a lot of efficacy here, and I really want to, kind of put the cap on all of this by, going through and really emphasizing that if we're making a request, and I hear many, many times every day, when someone's trying to explain why either they have a black eye or, a staff member or a client has scratches on them, or there's a disagreement, or a client's become aggressive. All I did was ask him to put on his coat, or all I did was ask him to go to group. But it's not what we ask, but it's how we ask it. And by incorporating this nurturing behavior and positive interactions into our approaches, then we can facilitate outcomes. Right, this is one of the things we're looking at, right? We're looking at being able to have each of us be able to grow our capacity to get to the point where our outcomes are enhanced. Well, this does that. And basic, very simple, very straightforward, how would you want to be treated? Okay, and as we look at all this, the question always comes up, is it nature or nurture? And the answer is yes, it's both. Okay, so even though your nature may include a lot of ACEs, your nurture could include a lot of the 6 things we've talked about to make us better staff and better individuals to approach for those that we serve. So that's everything I had for today. I appreciate you guys attending. I don't know if we have enough time, got a few seconds maybe for questions, but that's all I got.
Hey, John, I'd like to prompt those who want CEUs for BCBAs and BCABAs to remember to chat to us their certification number to acquire those. And I cannot thank you enough, John. I always enjoy hearing you and all the relevant information you have to share, and the behavior analytic approach that is made user-friendly to everyone, whether it's a behavior analyst, a new behavior analyst, or our direct support staff. You
Great, John. Thank you so much
Much appreciated, Rita. Thank you very much for those kind comments.
Thank you so much. You're getting lots of thank yous in the chat box, and your presentation today was outstanding. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Glad to do it. Thanks for having me.
We're going to take about a 10-minute break